Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at 17th Century Minimalist, which is a historical low fantasy OSR rulebook put out by Games Omnivorous, which is a RPG publisher from Portugal, I believe. It also comes with a mini adventure folder that we will be looking at once we take a look at the core rulebook. So it's a great little rulebook. It is minimalist, as it indicates in the title. It has this wonderful little stitched binding. You can see this red thread along the side, which is a great look, I think. Here's the back of our book explaining what makes this different. Before we get started though, quick shout out to some of our new patrons over on Patreon, including Raymond McVeigh, Superhorse, Jonathan Hastings, Kim Hulaganga, Nick, Omer Golan Joel, NMCS, and Joshua Blair. Thanks so much, guys, for supporting the channel. If you don't know, patrons get access to these videos before YouTube does, as well as getting to vote on what books get to review next, and being part of our secret Discord server. Links down below if you would like to join them. Writing and concept for this was done by Andre Novoa, and artwork by Offworld Bogle Initiative. What I really like about the author's note at the beginning is that we do get a ludography, so we get some of the influences that went into making this book the way it is. So the Black Hack, LOTFP, Troika, Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Mothership were all influences. I really like seeing that because as I went through this, I was picking up on some of those influences, but it's nice to see them credited. So how is this game different? Again, a great thing to put at the beginning of your book, especially if you're selling stuff to the OSR crowd, which is always looking for those fine distinctions between rule sets. So all of the rules are simplified and compressed to their essence. It's historical and it's low fantasy, as you can tell from the cover. It has firearms. It does not have magic. There is an illusionist class in this book, but you can kind of explain away their abilities by being tricks or, illusions rather than being strictly magic. Combat is faster, deadlier, and scarier, and hit points are static. So you start off with static hit points and they don't ever change. So you can be killed in just 1 or 2 hits, in theory, throughout most of the game. And that means that you're going to be much more careful about getting into combat. And finally, the game rewards those who do what their class is best at, experience-wise, and also gives optional mechanics for reputation. The two together offer opportunities for a more narrative style of play. We have your basic rules. There's a lot of influence from the Black Hack here because you have 5 main attributes shown here, and it's a roll under system. You're just rolling a d20 under your score in order to accomplish most things. There's advantage and disadvantage, but you can also get double advantage and double disadvantage, where you roll 3 dice and choose the highest or lowest, which is a great rule. I've used that before myself. Rules for combat. So to hit opponents, you test your strength in a melee fight or dexterity in range attacks to see if you hit. So it's all done with player-facing rolls. The players are pretty much the only people who roll dice the vast majority of the time. We have rules for critical hits and fumbles. We have armor. Armor is done similar to the Black Hack, where each type of armor grants a number of dice equal to its armor value. When you're hit in combat, you may use one of these dice to ignore all damage taken. So you remove one of those dice from your character sheet, and then you can try and recover them later by repairing armor. You have to roll these dice to see if they get repaired. We have weapon damage. Small weapons do D4, medium weapons do D6, big weapons do D8. We have at 0 hit points, you roll on this little table, similar to the Black Hack. The way the initiative works, however, is what we see in Troika, where you actually have a bag full of different colored dice, and then you pull out different dice one at a time to see who goes next. So there's some influence there. Rules for firearms. All firearms have misfire rules and take a long time to load. So generally speaking, you're going to run into combat, probably fire your firearm, and then throw it down and get to your other weapons, because you're not going to be firing over and over again. We have rules for character creation, where it's a little bit interesting here because it's different than what you typically see in OSR games, where you roll 3d4 for each ability, and then you re-roll all of the abilities with a score of 5 or less using 1d4 plus 12. So I think this just balances your stats out a bit more, but if you get a really bad character, then you can start all over again. You have usage dice for most of your resources. So this is a system from the Black Hack where you, when purchasing, things start off with a D12 that represents how much you have. And then when you use it, you roll the die. And then on a 1 or 2, the D12 would step down to the next biggest die, like a D10 and then a D8, until it gets down to nothing, and then the stuff has run out. I'm not a huge fan of this personally, although I know it's very popular among certain OSR players. For me, I don't see the big advantage. You're still writing down the die size on your character sheet. You're still rolling the die and then stepping things down, so you have to erase stuff and then rewrite your new usage die. So you're still doing a lot of tracking. I don't see how that's a big advantage over just tracking the amount of stuff that you have. It seems about the same to me, so I'm not sure how it really speeds things up. I know some people really like it, though. Rules for encumbrance. You can carry a number of items equal to your strength. Carrying more items means you're overburdened. Some rules for campaigning. So depending on what class you have, you're going to get XP in different ways. So backstabbing, stealing, exotic items, and disarming hard traps would be what the cutthroat would have to do to gain XP. And then each of the other classes have their own special requirements. But you do not gain hit points as you level up. You have a system for reputation here. Value from 1 to 12, you start off at 6, and then you can move up or down, depending on if you're doing good stuff or bad stuff. But if you get all the way to 12 for being very famous, or all the way down to 1 for being very infamous, and then you do something that would push you beyond that, you start getting famous or infamous tokens, which is a fun little system. So if you are at 12 and you do something great, you get a famous token. You can get up to 2 at the same time, and then you can spend them to do cool stuff. For example, having free lodging and food at the next town you visit, or being immediately received by the authorities of the city. Similarly, bad things can happen, but that you can turn to your advantage if you are very infamous. So, for example, you can hire one retainer for free, a pesky, vicious retainer, or perhaps spend an infamous token to instill fear in the adversaries, hindering them from attacking. So you actually pay attention to the way that people think about you. Some rules for commerce and pets, and rules for training your pets, which is a fun little rule there. Some rules for retainers, alcohol and drugs, along with some drug samples and things that can happen to you when you take them. Rules for disease. This does take place in the 17th century, so things like disease and poison are probably going to come into play a lot. So it's nice to see concrete rules for those. Anything from the Black Death to chickenpox to dungeon fever to leprosy and so on. A little layout thing here that I found a bit troublesome was the way that on some of these tables, every other one is done in this sort of light red or pink shading, which looks fine on a table like this. But on a really big one where you have like these white bars in between them, it actually made it kind of difficult for me to read. So I wish it would have been all solid colored without those white bars in between. A quote from Don Quixote of La Mancha. And we have our character classes. So we have Cutthroat. We have an illusionist. We have the illusionist's bag of tricks, a plague doctor with the plague doctor's treatments, and a soldier. And finally, a swashbuckler. All of these are very flavorful. This doesn't feel super historically realistic. It's definitely low fantasy. So there's little to no magic in there, but there is a lot of flavor and a sense of humor about these characters, where it's not trying to be a historical simulation at all. So cutthroats get luck tokens, which they can spend for not today to avoid death, or to get sneak attacks. Illusionists get spells or illusions, or I guess you could just call them tricks. And what happens is that at each of your levels, as you go up, you just gain a new bag of tricks. You get everything at each level. So by level 3, you would know all of these. And I like these. These are things that, again, you probably could explain, well, maybe most of them, using just, oh, it was just a trick. I'm just very good at tricks and illusions. Although some of them push that a bit farther, I think. So, for example, you have Hold Portal, makes a door or passage suddenly become obstructed. Or Death Hoax, you can simulate death for a certain number of hours. Some get more extreme as you go up, like Pass Through Glass. You may pass through glass. If failed, the glass breaks and does 1d6 damage. You can catch bullets in your teeth, which is really great. Plague Doctors, of course, are kind of like the clerics. So what they get are abilities to influence people's health. They have stuff like applying leeches to heal people. They can speak with vermin. Eventually they can speak with death. Or speak with the dead. So again, we're in a situation where, can you really speak with the dead if this is no fantasy? I suppose you could say that the doctor is examining their body to figure out who killed them and is saying that they are speaking to the dead. You can instigate fear in other people. You can raise dead, but perhaps you're just really good at surgery. We have soldiers. Soldiers have some special abilities, including that they have no disadvantage with big weapons. They have advantage on resisting disease, alcohol, and drugs. They get an extra action if you roll your exact strength when you're making attack rolls. And you're merciless, so your critical threat range equals your level and has separate critical hit tables. So as you level up, you are going to be doing critical hits more and more, and they will get more and more deadly. So you become just a vicious killer on the battlefield. Swashbucklers have some fun effects, including things like you gain a luck skill, so you gain some luck every day. You do combat stunts a number of times equal to your level per fight, so you got some stunts you can pull off. You can test luck in any saving throw situation. And the weirdest one for me was you can never refuse a duel. So this makes sense thematically. For me, it does kind of take away from character agency where you literally cannot refuse a duel. So I might tweak that. But it does mean that you're going to be getting into fights constantly. And whenever you get into a fight, you have to roll on this psychology test table to see what's going on in your head as you do this duel. So for example, the pride of the swashbuckler obliges him or her to fight without any piece of armor. So you're always getting into hairy situations. We have some tips at the back of the book, including about hit points and damage and how to run skill rolls, and some advice for converting monsters from other OSR systems, which is really useful. All right, so those are our basic rules. Let's look at what we get in the adventure folder. So this is really well designed. It's very pretty. It just folds open like this, and it comes out with 5 of these little mini rules. We got some summaries over here. Let's fold this up. And so there's a number of adventures here. Let's just start with this one. We have the Wild Witch Chase. Some of them are just 2 panels. This one is 3 panels. And many of these are less, strictly speaking, adventures. They're more just like scenarios or situations. I don't know if I would run these just as the adventure for the day in many cases, but you can often overlay these on other things that are going on to add some more spice. So for this one, all that's happening is you've got a town. Here's an image of the town on the back, Dudburg. And they think that there is a witch. There's a witch among them somewhere because there has been events going off every day. Weird, strange omens every day have been happening, and they want you to get to the bottom of it. One thing about these adventures is that the text is very small. I don't know if it's smaller than in the main book, but it feels a little bit smaller. And the font has a lot of very thin strokes and ligatures, which gives a lot of dazzle to the page and makes it kind of hard to read. This is especially true when black is printed on the dark red background. That was really an eye strain. So I would have made all of this white. I think that would have helped. The way that this works is you just have a huge list of characters, and then each character has a behavior, and then they have evidence that might make them the witch, and then and then who they accuse if you talk to them. So what I would probably do here is I would maybe just photocopy this column and hand it out to all of the players so that they have just a sense of who to talk to, or maybe do it in small chunks as they go to different parts of the town. The book recommends that you just sort of list off to the players everyone they can talk to, but that seems a bit much to me because there's a lot there. But there's plenty of material that you can use for fodder here. And of course, all the characters are accusing one another. There's all suspicion around basically all of them, so any of them could be the witch. The twist, of course, at the end is that there is no witch, and everyone's just tearing each other apart. So a rather grim prospect. Excuse me. We also have Black Plague Now. which is another little city adventure. I rather like this one. I love the way that it just has the layout of the town right there in the middle, and then it has interesting locations all around the edges with things just pointing to them. Very easy to read and interpret. So I don't know, again, if this would be an adventure in itself, but it does give you a lot of things to do in a city that is riddled with the Black Plague. Are you going to loot the town? Are you going to try and take it over? Are you going to try and just get out of there? It's totally up to you. But there's plenty of hooks to draw you in and things for you to mess around with. There's rules, of course, for contagion in case you get the Black Death. And there's other NPCs like robber factions and leper colony and other things that you can interact with. We have Ticking Time Bomb. In Ticking Time Bomb, a nobleman, so this is just a 2-page spread, a nobleman gives you a chest, which you are required to deliver to another nobleman. And so it's an overland adventure where you're going across these encounters on the road. There's 8 of them listed here. Some of them are amusing. Some of them seem a little bit strange. For example, you can run into a starving giant bear that tries to steal your chest. Not totally sure how a giant bear would steal a chest or why it would want to, but that's a thing that can happen. And then arriving in town, you find the actual nobleman, and you can explore his palace by wandering around through it. And then when you try and give it back to him, he says that he has never ordered a chest and doesn't know who you are, but he will take it from you and not pay you. So that is quite a lot of work for the players to go through to get no pay. But I suppose they could try and fight the nobleman and take payment. However they want to do it. The twist at the very end is that the chest is a bomb. And then eventually it goes off, blowing up either you or the nobleman that you were delivering it to. Because you are assassins sent by the first nobleman to kill the second. Next up, we have Hedge Death Maze. This is a fun little adventure where you have a maze on the back. So this is very arts and craftsy in the sense that all the players get a copy of this maze, and then once they begin exploring it, they start tracing out their route in real time. The setup is that you have run into another eccentric nobleman who likes having these giant hedge mazes, and he's obsessed with ancient Greek mythology. And so he bets you a ridiculous amount of money that you can't get to the end of his maze. And as you explore it, you're going to run into all sorts of servants and people dressed up as characters from Greek mythology who are trying to kill you. They're dressed up as minotaurs or centaurs or things like that. And there's also traps in the maze. Mechanically, all that happens is that once you say go, players all begin tracing their way through the maze on their own map. They can either try and stay together by looking at each other's maps or just go their own way. And after a set amount of time, I think it's 2 minutes, perhaps 3 minutes, you just say stop. Players have to put down their pencils, and then you say what the first encounter is by rolling on here. And then you go again, and then eventually, after like 2.5 minutes, you roll on the second encounter. And then you try and get all the way to the end without dying. When you get to the end without dying, the nobleman is infuriated and refuses to pay you any money. So there's a little bit of a pattern there, where you keep doing these missions for noble people who then refuse to pay you at the end. I would definitely offer more opportunities for players to get that reward, because if you keep not rewarding them for their struggles, then they will probably stop doing missions. Last of all, we have the cluster Flippin. This is a fold-out page right here. The general setup here is that you have an inn, as you would expect. Here is the layout on the very back. And you are sent here in order to recover a alchemical recipe that the innkeeper has. The innkeeper is part of the Rosicrucians, and he may have the recipe for creating gold. Obviously, this would be worth a ridiculous amount of money. So you show up there, but as you show up, 6 other people show up as well, all of which have their own objectives. Some of them are also after the recipe, some of them are after the innkeeper, some of them are after thieves, and then things just come to a head and devolve into chaos with everyone killing everyone by the end of it. It's a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino film. You can also, of course, if you manage to make it out of here with that recipe for gold, try and create gold yourself by going on a mission and collecting different types of alchemical recipes and artifacts. And then, of course, once you try it, it doesn't work because you can't make gold alchemically. So repeating the theme we've seen before of going on long missions and then nothing happening at the end. Not my favorite setup. I would definitely reward players more, but the actual setup itself of different NPCs all going after each other is a lot of fun if you can manage that chaos. You are going to be building a big dice bag with initiative dice for all of these characters, and then as they go off on their initiative round, they're going to act out their particular motivation, and you'll have to manage that chaos. So that's my review for 17th Century Minimalist. As usual, links are down in the description below for where you can check it out for yourself. It seems like a very capable little system. I wouldn't use the usage dice personally, although some people like it, but most of the other rules are a lot of fun, and there's a lot of flavor to the classes in particular. A lot of fun special abilities that really are engaging for players and make your class seem like a lot of fun. All right, that's it for this time, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone.